If you're familiar with the video game industry at all, then you know remakes are quite the hot commodity these days. Games like the Resident Evil remakes, the Crash Bandicoot Insane trilogy, and the Spyro Reignited trilogy were big hits, and when we're talking remakes, there's no series quite as familiar with them than Pokemon. Throughout Pokemon's illustrious existence, there have been many remakes of fluctuating quality, and these days people are wondering if Pokemon should even remake their games anymore. But why are people saying this when remakes are all the rage? Well, let's go over the Pokemon remakes one by one and see why people are a bit hesitant to see future remakes from this franchise. But first, I'd like to thank you all for your support on my recent videos, and if you'd like to remake that support, click the like and subscribe button below and give a super effective boost to this video and my channel. Thanks again, and let's get started. So let me ask you something. What makes a good remake? And I'm not just talking about a good Pokemon remake, I mean a good video game remake in general. I'm sure everyone has a different answer, but for me personally, the remake has to be the definitive way to play the game. It can't just look nicer and sound better, it needs to play better, and have more reason for me to play it. You know, like having more content or something. Otherwise, what's the point? The first Pokemon remakes were Fire Red and Leaf Green, which were remakes of the original Red and Green version, or Red and Blue in the US. And as far as the remake of Gen 1 goes, it did its job. To this day, it is the definitive way to play these games. It added in modern-day conveniences and mechanics, ran as intended with way less bugs and glitches, and even had new content with the Sevi Islands. Yeah, sure, it still had some of the original problems, like HMs and a lack of viable Pokemon available to you, but when I want to play a Gen 1 game, these are the games I want to play. So I'd say these remakes were a success. But wait, wasn't there another pair of Gen 1 remakes? Well, more on that later. Next, let's look at Heart Gold and Soul Silver. Not only considered to be some of the best Pokemon remakes, but some of the best Pokemon games, period. Now, whether or not you agree with that is your own prerogative, but I will admit that these are the definitive way to play Gen 2. Like Gen 1, it added quality of life changes and current mechanics, and while it may not have added that much new content, Gen 2 was already, and still is, the most content-rich game out there, allowing you to explore 2 regions. Unfortunately, much like Fire Red and Leaf Green, some problems still persist, like HMs and the unbalanced nature of Gen 2 leveling system, which I'd hoped they would be fixed. So, while not perfect, they are the best way to play the Gen 2 games, making them a success in my eyes. Now we move on to Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. While it did add quality of life improvements and current mechanics from X and Y, this is sadly when Pokemon started cutting content. You see, any Pokemon fan will tell you that the best Gen 3 game was Emerald, an enhanced version of Ruby and Sapphire. And while the remakes do include some new content like the Delta episode, it took out things like the Battle Frontier, yet still took the time to put a sign there saying it's coming soon, the bunch of liars. Because of this, there's actually a debate on whether Emerald or the remakes are the definitive versions of Gen 3, and that's something the fanbase should never question. The remake should be the definitive version by default. There was no reason to not include all the content and changes from Emerald. And I know what you're thinking, but Professor, there's no reason to include all the content and changes from Emerald because it was a remake of Ruby and Sapphire. Well, why wasn't Emerald the one they remade? If Emerald is the obviously better version, then why not just remake that? Oh, I know why. It's because the Pokemon Company wants to sell 2 versions of the same game. They're going to keep running that scam until the end of time. But we don't need a remake of 2 versions if there's a better one already in existence. Just remake that. Which leads me to Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, the worst Pokemon remakes ever. While there is a debate on whether Emerald or the remakes are the definitive version of Gen 3, there is no debate here. Platinum is still the definitive way to play Gen 4. Diamond and Pearl were pretty flawed to begin with, and when Platinum came out, everybody forgot about Diamond and Pearl and just played that because it was so superior. So why not remake Platinum? I know, money. It was a rhetorical question. So the Gen 4 remakes were not only getting lesser versions, but they were also buggy and glitchy and didn't even feature all the quality of life changes that the recent games got. It was just a huge waste of time. Sadly, for some of us, this is the only way to play Gen 4 because the Pokemon Company refuses to re-release some of their older games, making used copies of the game rare and really expensive. And considering how long people were waiting for these remakes, it makes it all the more disappointing that they were so bad. And these weren't the only disappointing remakes we got on Switch. That's right, we can't forget about Let's Go Pikachu and Evie, another Gen 1 remake. Except this time, it was nowhere near as good as Fire Red and Leaf Green. Despite coming out on a much more advanced system, Let's Go just seemed out of date. It didn't look that great, and didn't have all the content of the previous remake. Kinda par for the course with Pokemon these days, huh? On top of that, the Pokemon Go mechanics that the game revolved around didn't sit well with some, and the fact you can't even transfer Pokemon from other generations into it didn't help the Pokedex problem. At least HMs weren't a problem anymore. I mean, I like the fact that it didn't play just like the old games completely, because that would be pointless, but it just felt unfinished in places. The point I'm trying laboriously to get to is Pokemon remakes have been deteriorating for a long time. At this point, it feels like the Pokemon Company doesn't even want to do them anymore, but keeps doing them because they're easy money. They're clearly rushed and not given the care that the older remakes got. And with Gen 5 being the next one in line, people are getting really nervous. Gen 5 is pretty well beloved by the fandom, and after seeing the Gen 4 remakes, most people don't want to see these games butchered. In conclusion, I personally don't think Pokemon should continue to do remakes, not with their current track record at least. If the quality had continued to be great like in the beginning, I would say go for it. But considering Let's Go and Broken Diamond and Shipped Early Pearl, I have no confidence in the Pokemon Company's ability to deliver good remakes. And maybe that's for the best. I kind of prefer Pokemon to go in new directions. The games have been getting stale, and this whole living in the past thing is really not helping. We need more innovation. The Pokemon Company should just re-release the old games on modern consoles. That's just as good, and in Gen 4's case would have been better than what we got. But what do you guys think? Leave a comment down below, and I'll see you next time.